Chip slip is wood chips mixed with clay slip. We use a trough made of plywood, and we fill the trough up with, in this workshop we've been doing 5 wheelbarrows of wood chips, and then 5 buckets full of clay slip. And then we mix the wood chips and the clay slip together with electric rototiller that we rigged up, and so we run that through the troughs a few times and it mixes it all up. We're trying to get the wood chips fully coated with the slip until they get, it's, goopy, but when you squeeze it you don't want water coming out, and the more you work with it you figure out the right consistency so that when you tamp it into your walls it stays put, it doesn't want to fall out, and it dries really nice and hard.
So when you have a big chip slip project, the slip part of the chip slip is clay. And clay starts out, well, clay can come in any state, but it's generally like this, a big pile of boulders that then you need to process to be able to mix into a paint consistency. And the clay acts as a binder and a preservative. So not only does it glue all the chips together, but it keeps them from rotting. So clay is magical stuff. If I could talk about the properties of clay for a moment. The reason clay is so sticky is it's actually not like other earthen materials. It's plates, not grains, and so the plates slide against each other. And see how hard this is? This is like, I can't break it. It seems just like a rock. But you drop this in water, listen. I'm going to let that sit for a couple of days. It will melt itself down with the help of perhaps some shovel stabbing and a paddle drill. And it will vibrate and pulverize the clay until you get a paint-like consistency. I'll show you. Where you can't see your skin through the clay.
So this wall is 12 inches thick, which is supposed to be equivalent to like a 6-inch fiberglass insulated wall, and then some, because it's got a solid mass, so that'll absorb some heat. So 12 inches here. This is hard packed. We use forms, plywood forms, and we cut the plywood into 2-foot sheets, put it on either side of the wall, pour the chip slip in about a foot, and then tamp it down. And then once it's hard, you pour it in another foot, tamp it down. When it gets to the top of the form, you can lift both forms up immediately, or you can add another form on top. But if you are lifting it up, you want to lift it up and have about 10 inches of overlap so that when you're tamping it, it doesn't fall out. And you can just go up the wall. And then this style is, you can see this is lath. It's just like, I think it's like 3/16 or 1/4-inch strips that we rip on the table saw. Because with the 8-inch wall with lath, you just dump the chips in and you kind of pat it down, spread it out, make sure it gets everywhere, fill it up, the 18 inches, and then add another 18 inches of lath, and then dump it in, fill it up. And so yeah, it's a lot looser, so it's going to be more insulative, and the wall doesn't need to be as thick. And the nice thing about the lath is that you can plaster on it immediately. So for this workshop, we've been filling up the walls, the lath walls, and then we paint it with a clay slip. and then we plaster on it right away, and you don't have to wait. For this wall, the hard packed wall, you got to wait for it to dry, which is about an inch per week. So for 12-inch wall, it'll take about 12 weeks before we can put any plaster on it without worrying about it settling.
And there's so many applications for clay, depending on what state you have it in, how thick the clay is. Like, you can't really do anything with it in this rock state, but if you melt it down, wet it, and so for chip slip, you want, as I said, this like paint-like consistency, paint kind of thickness. If you're going to do a base plaster, and plasters are the next layer on your chip slip. It like beautifies and protects a chip slip wall or a cob wall or any kind of earthen wall. Really, plaster has all kinds of applications. You either let the water evaporate out, or you put more clay in the mix, and you just keep pulverizing it until it's like the thickest milkshake imaginable. Or we always use food analogies, like a Dairy Queen blizzard. It's always like, is it cookie batter? Is it cake batter? It's like a thick, the thickest milkshake imaginable. Let's just say that. When you get it into that state of thickness, then you can start thinking about mixing a plaster to cover your chip slip wall and protect it once the chip slip is dry. And you mix it with fiber and sand, and the ratios are always different. You have to test your materials. This is wild feral clay from the forest. So we don't know, it's not a consistent strength of clay. Every shovelful could have a different actual clay content. It'll have some silt in there, some like different kinds of aggregate. So you always have to, go by feel. You can't really say this many buckets of water to this many buckets of clay, because your clay content could change in the soil. You always have to like feel it, see if you can see your skin through the thing, through the slip, not the thing. A plaster is much like a cob mix. It has like a sand element, the clay, and a fiber. And for this project, what we used was 1 sand, 1 clay, 1 fiber. So that's a very sticky, ooey gooey mix that we could apply just with our hands and then smooth with a trowel. The thing about clay is when it dries, it shrinks. It cracks. The platelets that it's made up of pull apart. And so you add sand for strength and stability. You add fiber for tensile strength. It's like a web in the wall, like natural rebar. And you could think of plaster as like, a 3/4 thick inch wall, and you have that straw in there, that fiber, to keep the clay from pulling apart. And yeah, that makes like a really beautiful, strong plaster. Base plaster. You can put other layers of plaster on top of that with different consistencies of clay, different ratios of fiber and aggregate, but it's all about testing and getting to know your materials and getting to know the feel of the clay.